After seeing an old guy slumped on the street, Amanda, a single mother who spends long hours as a cab driver, hurried him to the medical facility. An hour later, she was met with a startling turn of events. An ambulance was parked outside her home, and doctors and paramedics appeared to be waiting for her. Little did she know that her small act of kindness would change her life and her son's future in ways she could never have predicted. Hello everyone. Welcome back to Unveiled Narratives. Today, I have another touching story to share with you. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening. As her customer gave her a gratuity, Amanda smiled warmly and thanked him. The old passenger answered quietly, his hand quivering a little as he opened the door, got out, and took a few shaky steps away as Amanda observed him for a while. She sighed somewhat in relief as the door closed with a gentle thud, and after seeing the crumpled money in her palm, she rapidly counted them. As she carefully folded the cash and slipped it into her handbag with this tip, a satisfied grin appeared on her face. When her week of saving finally came to an end, it wasn't just any savings. It was for Liam, her 10-year-old son, whose birthday was tomorrow and he had been hoping to celebrate at the amusement park. Amanda had assured him that this year, as a single mother, she would make it happen. It had not been easy saving enough for the park tickets, the gift, and a small celebration, but tomorrow she would finally see Liam's face light up with joy, and that would make all of Amanda's hard work worthwhile. She worked tirelessly to give her son the childhood he deserved, and every ride she took, every tip she saved, and everything she did was for him. The next day, as Amanda shifted her seat and got ready to pull away, her eyes shifted to the rearview mirror and her heart skipped a beat. The elderly man she had just dropped off was on the ground, his frail hand raised weakly as if signaling for help. Without hesitation, she turned off the engine, opened the door, and rushed to his side. His breathing was shallow, his face was pale, and his body appeared to be unnaturally still. Amanda swiftly took out her phone and called 911. The operator told her that it would take 10 to 15 minutes for an ambulance to arrive. Observing the man's fragile condition, she knew he didn't have much time left. Fortunately, the hospital was only a few minutes away, so realizing she didn't have any more time, Amanda chose to take matters into her own hands. She steadied herself and carefully helped the man sit down, though he was weak, leaning on her for support as she led him back to the taxi. Once he was comfortable in the back seat, the man with her hands firmly holding the wheel, Amanda hurried to the hospital, praying she wouldn't arrive too late. After pulling up to the hospital's emergency entrance, Amanda rushed to help the elderly man get out of the car. He leaned heavily on her as they went inside, and nurses quickly stepped forward to help her get him into a wheelchair. A doctor joined them shortly after, evaluating the man's condition. One of the nurses said, "I found him fainting on the street," and Amanda explained breathlessly that he had been walking normally before collapsing. The nurses nodded. Amanda stayed still for a time, watching as they vanished as they wheeled the guy into the treatment area. With her pulse still racing from the haste to bring him to the now quiet reception area in time, she let out a trembling breath behind the swinging double doors. Amanda eventually gave herself permission to sit down, leaning back on the rigid plastic chair as fatigue set in. The night's events had happened so quickly that she had little time to take it all in. Several minutes later, a nurse came over to her with a clipboard in hand. "Hello, are you the one who brought the gentleman in?" Amanda answered, "Yes," standing up. "His condition is stable," the nurse added with a comforting grin. "He needs some emergency treatment, but it's nothing life-threatening, likely fatigue and low blood pressure." She stared at her paperwork for a moment. "Essential examinations and medical treatment to aid in his recovery." After a little pause, she said, "Unfortunately, it appears that he is alone in handling the expenses. Would you be willing to assist? It's not a big sum, but we need to move quickly." Amanda's breath caught in her throat, and her hand automatically went to her purse, where the week's savings were neatly folded. She had promised Liam the amusement park tickets, the gift, and the small celebration, and she could already picture his face lighting up with joy and his laughter as he explored the rides and attractions. She looked down at her purse, her fingers hovering over the clasp, and her mind flashed back to the elderly man's frail body and the way he had raised his trembling hand for assistance. Amanda closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and nodded. "Yes, I'll help. And the nurse smiled. "Thank you, I'll make sure everything is handled quickly." When the nurse left, Amanda leaned back in her chair and stared blankly at the floor, a knot of guilt and sadness twisting in her stomach as she considered how she would tell Liam tomorrow that the amuse park was no longer an option. Amanda handed over the money with a heavy heart, but she was resolute and reminded herself that this was the right thing to do and that someone's health and safety mattered more than a single day of celebration. How would she explain that all of the money she had saved up was gone? She took out her phone and looked through old photos of Liam. One of them, from last year's birthday, showed him holding a cupcake with a single lit candle, his smile brighter than any party decorations could ever be. Amanda's lips curled into a faint smile. Perhaps she couldn't give him the special day she had planned, but she could still make it unique in her own way. A little later, the doctor came out of the treatment room and walked toward Amanda. He said the guy was stable and that his blood pressure had fallen because of exhaustion and dehydration, but that he was responding well to therapy and would be released after getting a little more rest. "That's good to hear," Amanda said quietly as a rush of comfort passed over her. The doctor stopped to look into her eyes and inquired about the person who had brought him in. "He said he wanted me to thank them on his behalf since it seemed like you had gone above and beyond to assist him." Amanda gave a modest little grin and shook her head, saying, "It was the least I could do." She began to go for the exit, her body heaving from tiredness. Her shift was finished, and it was long past midnight. All she wanted to do now was go home, where Liam would be waiting for her even if he had probably before she reached the departure door. The idea of her kid, who had already fallen asleep, gave her otherwise exhausted mind a little glimmer of hope. When Amanda had a sudden notion that stopped her in her tracks, she turned around and dug into her handbag to get one of her cab business cards. She then approached the nurse at the registration desk and smiled gently, saying, "If he or anyone in his family needs anything, please let me know." After leaving the hospital, Amanda said, "I don't live far, and I'd be happy to help in any way I can." The nurse accepted the card, and her expression softened with gratitude. "That's very kind of you, I'll make sure they get this." The quiet streets provided a brief moment to reflect, but her mind was heavy with the events of the night. Like many working parents, she frequently relied on Lisa to watch Liam during her late-night shifts, knowing he would be safe and cared for. As she turned into the driveway and parked, she took a deep breath to try to shake off her exhaustion before leaving. Liam ran to her as soon as she arrived, his face glowing with excitement even though she was worried. Amanda couldn't help but smile as she gave him a hug and could see how excited he was for tomorrow. His positive energy filled the car as they drove home, and he talked to nonstop about the amusement park, the rides, the games, and how much fun it would be. As they got closer to home, Amanda's mind raced as she practiced what she would say to Liam, trying to find the right words to explain everything without breaking his heart. She didn't want to dampen his happiness, but she knew she had to tell him the truth. The money she had worked so hard to save had gone to help the elderly man at the hospital, so she couldn't take him to the amusement park as promised, at least not tomorrow. When she saw flashing red and blue lights ahead of their house, Amanda's stomach dropped. She saw an ambulance parked in front of her door, its lights creating harsh patterns across the dark street. She slowed the car, her pulse quickening, knowing that something was wrong. The joy on his face faded, but she knew there was no way around it. As they left, Liam held her hand securely. His previous exhilaration had given way to calm bewilderment as they got closer to Amanda, who saw paramedics and doctors waiting beside the ambulance as if they had been expecting her. Beside the stretcher, a well-dressed guy moved forward to greet her. "Miss the name Amanda, I'm James," he stated in a polite but serious tone. "I'm this gentleman's son. My father insisted that we come here tonight to thank you personally. He told me about your generosity earlier today and how you didn't hesitate to assist him in his time of need." The doctors and paramedics were close by, prepared to help if necessary, and their presence was a precaution to protect his safety as they brought him back to the hospital. Amanda looked at the old guy, who gave her a feeble smile as he thanked her with his eyes. "My father wanted to express his gratitude in a meaningful way, so James reached into his coat and held out an envelope." Amanda hesitated, her hands shaking as she opened the envelope, and there was a check for so much money that it took her breath away. She stared at it, trying to process what she was holding, and said, "I can't take this, I didn't help him, expecting anything in return. James gently returned the package to her hands. You deserve it since you didn't expect anything, and this is for you and your kid to make life a little bit simpler. The old man looked down at the envelope, her fingers grazing its edges as though attempting to verify that it was real. A mixture of relief and disbelief descended upon her as she nodded, her voice steady but soft. Thank you so much. I don't know what to say. The elderly man met her eyes and nodded gently, his expression warm and encouraging as if silently urging her to accept. For the first time in a long time, hope took the place of the constant worry in Amanda's heart. The check in her hands wasn't just money, it was a chance to give Liam the life he deserved, one that was filled with warmth, joy, and opportunity. James offered a small smile, and she didn't have to say anything, she just had to accept it. The elder man smiled back, his gratitude shining through his tired eyes, and the doctors moved to help him back into the ambulance. If you were moved by this story, please remember to press the like button and subscribe to our channel.